We are holding a Tanya Perek Dalet, and what we're dealing with is something very important that we have to speak about because we're coming up to Purim, and it goes as follows. So, there was once in the country of Germany, they had a very distinguished guest, and that was the Rebbe Rashab. Now, the Rebbeim would travel a lot more than you would expect. You see, the Maggid Mizrich was known for staying in his town, but a lot of the Rebbeim traveled. And I don't know if you know this, the Rebbe Rashab, the Friedrich Rebbe, they traveled quite a lot around Europe on all sorts of various top secret missions. So, the Rebbe Rashab was traveling in Germany, and he was there for Purim, so he said a mimer. Now, this mimer was very unique. Now, most mimarim are said in Yiddish, and it's on purpose they're said in Yiddish. As a matter of fact, the Rebbeim explained that Yiddish, which started off as a very basic language, not only a basic language, it was a conglomerate. It started off as Judendeutsch, which means Jewish German, because there was a big Jewish community in Germany, and they started speaking a bit of German Jewish mixed together, and then as the Yidden moved further east to Poland, Russia, Ukraine, Lithuania, it started to take on more of those flavors. Now that the headquarters of Judaism is in Israel and America, and Yiddish is spoken more by those American ultra-Orthodox, if you want to call it, Chassidus Yidden, so it take on more of an American flavor. So, Yiddish was the language that most Yidden spoke. And Yiddish started off as a very basic language, not a holy language. Lashon Kodesh, the holy tongue was holy. But since the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid and all the Rebbeim after said their Maimarim in Yiddish, it became a holy language. It took on a certain degree of holiness. But here, there's very few exceptions. There's very few exceptions to Chassidus being said in other languages. You see with the Rebbe, there's a few sichos. There was the famous sicha in Lag BaOmer that was in Russian. There was famous sicha in French. There was very short sichos. There's very short sichos said to the Machne Yisrael Development Fund in English. But they were very, very short. But basically, it's all in Yiddish. So, this one time, with the German crowd, the Rebbe Rashab sat down and he began to say a mimer in German. Now, this was a big problem. It was great for the locals. The locals all spoke German, so they could understand. Now, obviously, this mimer was more of a basic mimer, a mimer that the locals could understand. Now, exactly what went on in the mimer, no one knows. You know why? Because the local German populace, these Yekishe Yidden, they weren't used to Chassidim and Rebbes. They thought, very nice. The rabbiner is giving a speech in very polished German, very impressive. He speaks his language, very nice speech, and they all went home and said it was very nice. Now, there were a few Chassidim traveling with Rebbe Rashab. And one of the main reasons that they were there, besides for the great mitzvah of helping in Talmud Chacham, was the Rebbe says in Maimarim, we need to get recorded. We need to tell all the Chassidim at home. We need to have it written down for our children and grandchildren and everyone around here. So this chassid sitting there is like a hardcore chassid. Like someone who's capable of hearing a mimer for like 5 hours straight on a Shabbos afternoon and remembering it all on Motzei Shabbos to write it down word for word. And he's sitting there and he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand. I can't say he didn't understand the word because he spoke Yiddish. And Yiddish is like quasi-German. By that generation, it was already taken on a lot of Polish and Russian and Ukrainian. So by that stage, he understood maybe every second or third word. He's trying to piece together bits and pieces. And by the end of the mimer, he managed to piece together. There was one sentence he understood what the Rebbe said. And he came out from the mimer, he came back from the trip in Germany. All of a sudden, like, oh, so what did the Rebbe speak about this Purim? So it's like, I can tell you one sentence, but that's it. But they weren't disappointed because that was a very powerful sentence. What he picked up from the mimer was that Haman can only make it into the outer courtyard. To the inner courtyard, he can never make it. What does that mean? It says in the Megillah that Haman approached to the courtyard, the outside courtyard. You can imagine the king's palace. He has his inner sanctuary where his throne room is, and you have to be invited into there. That's where Esther went into. Then you have the outer courtyard outside of the palace. You're a fancy king. You have to have a big outer courtyard. So, what does this mean? Haman is the bad guy in the story. And in each one of us, everything in Torah is teaching us a lesson in ourselves. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you guys all know, because it's just in today's Hayom Yom, one of the points of Chassidus is to show you how every little bit of Torah, every detail, is both simultaneously explaining to you the highest heights, understanding of how Hashem runs the entire world, the universe, the cosmos, Atzilus, and at the same time, each of it is going all the way to the lowest depths to teach you about a person's journey in serving Hashem, a very human, physical journey. So, Haman is the bad guy. Inside of us, we have a Yetzer Hara, evil, like Rebbe Rashab used to say, Rebbe Rashab, evil inclination, the evil inclination, which is always telling us to do bad things. And that's our Haman. And sometimes we listen to it and sometimes we stand up. The thing is, he can only get to the outer courtyard. He can only get to the outside of a person, the superficial level, the outer feelings. But the inner essence of a person, your inner feelings, who you really are, your identity, the inner courtyard, Haman can never get to that. That's what the Rebbe Rashab taught these German Yidden. But by the way, Germany at the time was in the throes of assimilation. How many people do you think there had a beard? How many people do you think there sat and learned Gemara every day? They were going very deeply into assimilation. There was a big movement, a massive movement in Germany to be a Jew in the home and a German on the street. Massive movement. They thought they were going to save Judaism and stop anti-Semitism by acting as much as the Goyim as possible, by acting like a German on the street. And look, didn't exactly work too well, did it? But a couple of years later, there was another Haman in Germany who came about. You ever heard of him? There's another Haman in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. But our inner Haman, he can only get to the outside. So we have to know that we're Yidden deep down. So when you come to a Fabrengen, let's say, and Mashpia is saying, okay, we all have to try again. Forget about the failures of today and yesterday. From now on, from tonight, we're starting all over again. And you can get very frustrated. The first Fabrengen you come to, you're like, okay, I'm starting again. The second one, you're like, I messed up, but this time I'm starting again. The third one, this time I really mean it. And then after a while, you're 40 years old. I remember being by Fabrengen of Rebbe Winner, and he said, such a Chassidus Yid. He's like, okay, Hachlota number 4,782 on the pile. Just throw on another resolution. You know, there's people every year, New Year's resolution, they decide to go on a diet, and by the 2nd of January, they're eating cake. Yeah? That's all if you're making resolutions. But if you're a Yid, if you have a neshama, if you have a godly spark within you that Haman can never touch, then not only can you start again, within yourself, you never messed up. Within yourself, you are perfect and pure. Within yourself, you have the ability, and not only the ability, it actually exists a part of you that is absolutely perfect. And you just have to let that part of you out. You just have to express it. You just have to stop acting on a superficial level and stop being, who am I? Oh, I am my weaknesses. I am my bad actions. I'm my outside. I'm the outer courtyard where Haman hangs out. And you have to start tapping into the inner courtyard where only Esther, who represents the Jewish neshamas, goes into Achashverosh, which is called Hamelech, the king, as it says in the Medrash, Achashverosh Shaloi, that the beginning and end is his, the king over all time and all things, which is Hashem. So deep down within each of us, we're all connected to Hashem. That's really what we're learning about in Tanya nowadays. We learned in Perek Aleph that there's the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh Bahamis. We have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. There's Nefesh Bahamis. But then we learn in Perek Beis that there's Nefesh Elikis, there's a godly soul deep down. And in Perek Gimel, we learn that the godly soul has 10 parts to it of expression. In Perek Dalet, we're learning about how not only do they have 10 parts, but those 10 parts are expressed through thought, speech, and action, which are very external. Thought, speech, and action can sometimes be good. Perek Dalet and Perek Hey, we're going to talk about the good. And Perek Vav, we're going to give all sorts of examples of not good speech, not good thoughts, not good actions. You can mess up. But that's all on the outside. That's all the outer courtyard. That's all an expression. Deep down, the neshama, we say every morning in davening, Elikai, my God, Haneshama Satabi, the neshama he gave to me, Tahirahi, it's pure. It's absolutely pure. Deep down, each one of us is pure. There's never any reason to give up. There's never any reason to be downcast. There's only ever reason to say, I'm going to be more real, more myself. Some people are like, oh, who am I to start learning Torah? Who am I to start doing mitzvahs? That's not really who I am. Quite the opposite. Really who you are is someone who learns Torah and does mitzvahs. On the outside, the fake you, that's the one that messes around and messes up. It's a bit like the Chassid who came to the Rebbe Rashab. Another story of the Rebbe Rashab. You ready for this? Last story. That he would come to the Rebbe Rashab and he would always come dressed as a Chassid with a kapota and a hat. And he looked like a real Chassid. But when he'd go home, he was a big businessman, so he'd put on a fancy suit, he'd take off his hat, he'd put on a fancy tie, he'd dress up a bit. Every time he'd come to Lubavitcher, he dresses like a Lubavitcher. comes one time, he's coming to the Rebbe, he's like, who am I kidding? Who am I fooling? I'm kidding around the Rebbe that I'm such a big chassid. Okay, no more fooling. I'm going to come into the Rebbe like a dress every day. He walks into the Rebbe like a fancy Wall Street businessman. I don't know if they had Wall Street businessmen back in Russia, but a fancy Moscow or Petersburg or Leipzig businessman with his fur hat and his fancy suit. And he walks in, and the Rebbe says, "Oi, I'm so upset to see that you're dressing like this." And he's like, "Rebbe, I couldn't be fooling you anymore. I always dress like this. This is who I am." So Rebbe Rashab says, No. I knew you dress differently here in Lubavitch than you do back in business. But I thought the real you was the way you dressed in Lubavitch. And in business, you were dressing up. I'm so upset to see that it was in Lubavitch you're dressing up. So each of us has to know that really we're dressing up in business. We're dressing up in the world. Deep down, we are that chassid. We are that yid. We are really who we want to be. Just we have to express that.